Captain Minjun Park stood at the viewport of the neutral space station, watching the alien ship approach. The vessel looked nothing like human designs. It curved and flowed like liquid metal, with no sharp edges or visible engines. Soft blue lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that seemed almost like breathing. "First contact with the Galactic Telepathic Alliance," he said to Ambassador Li Hei-jin, who stood beside him. "No pressure at all." Li smiled nervously. "The briefings said they've never encountered a species like us. Every other race in the galaxy is telepathic. And we're the odd ones out," Minjun replied. "The species that can't read minds." The human delegation had prepared for months. Earth's best diplomats, scientists, and military officers had studied everything they could about the Alliance. The alien empire controlled thousands of worlds, all united through mental communication. They had agreed to this meeting after detecting human radio signals, curious about a species that seemed to have no telepathic abilities at all. The alien ship docked with a soft vibration through the station's hull. Minjun straightened his uniform and checked his translation device one more time. The Alliance had provided the technology, claiming it would work through mental resonance patterns. The humans weren't entirely sure what that meant, but the device had worked perfectly during preliminary communications. "Remember," Li said quietly, "they think we're primitive because we can't share thoughts. We need to prove that humanity deserves respect." The airlock cycled open with a hiss. The first alien stepped through, and Minjun felt his breath catch. The being was tall and graceful, with pale silver skin that seemed to shimmer. Its head was larger than a human's, with enormous dark eyes that reflected light like mirrors. It wore flowing robes that moved as if underwater. Behind the first alien came 4 others, each slightly different, but sharing the same ethereal quality. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if they shared a single mind. Which, Minjun realized, they probably did. The lead alien approached and spoke. Its voice was melodic, almost musical. "Greetings, humans. I am Zix Thara, Mind Speaker of the Fifth Circle. We welcome you to this historic meeting." Minjun stepped forward and bowed slightly. "I am Captain Minjun Park of the Earth Alliance. This is Ambassador Li Hei-jin. We're honored to meet you." Zix Thara's large eyes studied him with obvious curiosity. "We confess great interest in your species. Never before have we encountered minds that remain silent to us. We cannot sense your thoughts or emotions. It is most unusual. We evolved differently," Li explained. "Humanity developed without telepathic abilities. We communicate through speech, writing, and body language." "Primitive methods," another alien murmured, though not unkindly. "Yet, you have achieved space travel. Most curious." The negotiations began in the station's main conference room. The aliens sat on one side of a crystalline table, the humans on the other. Minjun found himself fascinated by how the aliens seemed to communicate among themselves without speaking. They would pause. Their eyes would dim slightly. Then they would all nod, in agreement. "We have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 of your years," Zix Thara explained. "All species we have encountered join our mental network willingly. We share knowledge, emotions, and purpose. There is no war, no conflict, when minds are united." "That sounds peaceful," Minjun said carefully. "But humanity values individual thought and privacy. We might not be ready to join a collective mind." The aliens exchanged what might have been surprised glances. "Privacy?" Zix Thara asked. "You mean keeping thoughts separate? How do you function without sharing knowledge instantly?" Dr. Kim Seo-jun, the human psychologist, leaned forward. "We each have our own thoughts, memories, and decision-making processes. We share information through communication, but our minds remain independent." "No, independent minds," Zix Thara repeated the words as if they were foreign concepts. This explains much. Your species has achieved remarkable technological progress despite mental isolation. We wish to understand this phenomenon better. The alien stood gracefully and approached Minjun. With your permission, I would like to attempt mental contact. Perhaps a brief touch would allow me to understand your unique consciousness. It would be perfectly safe. Minjun looked at Li, who nodded slightly. The briefing had mentioned this possibility. Earth scientists had theorized that telepathic contact might help bridge the communication gap between species. If it will help our diplomatic relations? Minjun agreed. But I should warn you, I don't know what you'll find. Human minds might be very different from what you're used to. Zeexthara smiled, an expression that looked almost human despite the alien features. I am the most powerful telepath in the Alliance. I have touched the minds of 100 different species. Your human consciousness will be merely interesting. She reached out with one long, delicate hand. Her fingers were longer than human fingers, with smooth skin that seemed to glow faintly. Minjun held still as she placed her palm gently against his forehead. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Zixthera's eyes went wide, then rolled back until only the whites showed. Her mouth opened in a scream that seemed to come from her very soul. The sound was terrible, full of terror and pain and something like madness. Her body convulsed violently, and she collapsed to the floor, limbs twitching. The other aliens rushed to her side, their calm demeanor completely shattered. They touched her head and recoiled as if burned. One of them looked at Minjun with what could only be horror. What have you done? It demanded. What poison lies in your mind? Minjun backed away, hands raised. I didn't do anything. I just stood there. Li stepped between the humans and aliens. This is a misunderstanding. Captain Park had no intention of causing harm. But the aliens were already lifting their collapsed leader. Zixthara's body was rigid, her eyes staring at nothing, foam at the corners of her mouth. She looked like someone who had seen the worst thing imaginable. The meeting is ended, one of the aliens declared coldly. We will contact you when we understand what your species has done to our mind speaker. They carried Zixthara from the room, leaving the humans alone with the terrible weight of diplomatic failure. The first contact between humanity and the galactic civilization had lasted less than an hour. And somehow, without meaning to, Minjun had apparently broken one of their most powerful telepaths simply by letting her touch his mind. The future of human-alien relations had just become very complicated indeed. 3 days passed in the medical wing of the station, and Zixthara had not moved. She lay on a crystalline platform that pulsed with soft healing light, but her eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, seeing nothing. Her breathing was shallow and her body completely still, as if her mind had simply stopped working. Dr. Kim Seo-jun watched through the observation window, her tablet full of notes and theories. The alien physicians worked around Zixthara with devices that hummed and glowed, but their large eyes showed growing frustration. They had scanned every part of her body and found nothing physically wrong. Her neural patterns are completely disrupted, explained Vorth, the lead physician. His silver skin had lost some of its shimmer, and he moved with obvious exhaustion. We detect no injury, no toxin, no disease. Yet her mind appears shattered. High Counselor Vex and I arrived on the station that morning, bringing with him an escort of Alliance warships. The tall alien leader demanded answers, and his mental presence made even the human translation devices crackle with interference. Your species has attacked our finest mind speaker, he said to Minjun and Li during the emergency meeting. We will have an explanation. Or, humanity will be classified as a hostile force. Captain Minjun felt the weight of his entire species on his shoulders. High Counselor, I swear to you, I had no intention of harming Zixthara. I don't even understand what happened. Neither do we, Vexani replied coldly, which makes your people even more dangerous. A weapon that works without the wielder's knowledge is the worst kind. Ambassador Li stepped forward. We've brought our leading expert on human consciousness to help understand the situation. Dr. Kim Seojun has studied the human mind for 20 years. Dr. Kim bowed respectfully to the High Counselor. With your permission, I'd like to examine what happened during the mental contact. I believe I can explain why Zeekthara was injured. Vex Ani studied the small human woman with obvious skepticism. You claim to understand something that has baffled our greatest minds? I understand human consciousness, Dr. Kim said simply. And I suspect that's exactly what damaged your telepath. The alien physicians allowed Dr. Kim to observe their scans and readings. She spent hours studying the data, cross-referencing it with her knowledge of human brain patterns. The aliens watched impatiently as she worked, clearly doubtful that this primitive species could offer any insights. Finally, Dr. Kim called another meeting. She stood before a room full of aliens, with Minjun and Lee beside her for support. I need to explain how human minds work, she began. Every species you've encountered is telepathic, correct? They can share thoughts and emotions directly. Of course, Vexani said impatiently. Mental communion is the foundation of all intelligent life. Not for humans, Dr. Kim continued. We evolved in complete mental isolation. Each human mind developed independently, with no ability to share thoughts with others. Do you understand what this means? The aliens looked puzzled. Vorth, the physician, spoke up. It means your species is mentally defective, cut off from the unity that defines consciousness. Dr. Kim shook her head. It means we developed consciousness in a completely different way. Human minds don't operate through shared, organized thought patterns. We think through constant, internal chaos. She activated her tablet, showing brain scans of human neural activity. The aliens stared at the wild, seemingly random patterns of electrical activity. This is a human mind at rest, Dr. Kim explained. Notice the constant activity. Humans think in layers. We have our main thoughts, but also background worries, random memories, half-remembered songs, emotional reactions, and internal conversations, all happening at the same time. The aliens studied the scans with growing horror. This appears to be complete mental disorder, one of them whispered. To your organized minds, yes. Dr. Kim agreed. But to humans, this is normal. We live every moment with what you would consider overwhelming mental noise. We think about lunch while solving complex problems. We remember our childhood while making important decisions. We feel happy and sad about different things simultaneously. Vexani's large eyes narrowed. You're saying that human consciousness is a form of controlled madness? I'm saying that human consciousness operates on principles that would be incomprehensible to telepathic minds, Dr. Kim replied. When Zeekthara touched Captain Park's mind, she experienced all of this chaos directly. Imagine trying to drink from a waterfall when you're used to sipping from a calm stream. She brought up more brain scans. These ones showing the moment of contact between Minjun and the alien telepath. Here's what I think happened. Zeekthara opened her mind to receive Captain Park's thoughts, expecting the organized, linear thinking she was used to. Instead, she got hit with the full chaos of human consciousness. Every random thought, every background worry, every half-formed idea, and emotional reaction, all at once. The room fell silent. The aliens exchanged glances that might have been telepathic communication. Dr. Kim continued her explanation. Humans also have something that no telepathic species would understand. We can lie to ourselves while knowing we're lying. We can hold two contradictory beliefs at the same time. We can love someone and be angry with them simultaneously. Our minds are not logical or organized. They're adaptive and creative specifically because they embrace chaos. This is madness, Vexani said quietly. How does your species function with such disordered thinking? Very well, actually, Minjun interjected. We've built a technological civilization, created art and music, explored space, and developed complex societies, all while carrying this chaos in our heads every moment of every day. Dr. Kim nodded. The human mind is like a storm that never stops, but it's a controlled storm. We've learned to think productively within the chaos. In fact, the chaos makes us more creative and adaptable than linear thinking would allow. She looked directly at Vexani. When Zeke's Thara touched Captain Park's mind, she experienced what it's like to be human for just a few seconds. The experience was so overwhelming that it damaged her mental patterns. Not because Captain Park attacked her, but because human consciousness operates on completely alien principles. The High Counselor was quiet for a long time, his silver features thoughtful. Finally, he spoke. You're saying that your species' apparent weakness, your mental isolation, has created a form of consciousness that our most powerful telepath cannot even safely observe? Exactly, Dr. Kim confirmed. Humanity isn't mentally defective. We're mentally different. So different that our thought patterns are dangerous to telepathic minds. Vorth, the physician, looked up from his readings with sudden understanding. This would explain why we cannot sense their thoughts at all. The chaos would be invisible to our organized perception. Like trying to hear a whisper in a thunderstorm, Dr. Kim agreed. Vex and I studied the humans with new interest. If this is true, then your species represents something unprecedented in galactic history. A form of consciousness that exists outside our understanding. The question is, Lee said carefully, what happens now? Can Zeke's Thara be healed? And can our species find a way to coexist? The High Counselor looked at the medical readings showing the damaged telepath. First, we must repair what was broken. Then, perhaps, we must learn to understand what we have encountered. In the medical bay, Zeke's Thara's eyes flickered for the first time in days, as if she was finally beginning to wake from a terrible dream. Zeke's Thara's eyes focused for the first time in 5 days. She blinked slowly, as if remembering how to see. The medical chamber around her hummed with healing energy, but she seemed to notice none of it. Instead, she stared at her own hands as if they belonged to a stranger. Dr. Kim Seo-jun leaned forward in her chair beside the medical platform. Zeke's Thara? Can you hear me? The alien telepath turned her head with careful, deliberate movements. When she looked at Dr. Kim, her large, dark eyes held something that hadn't been there before. Something that might have been wonder, or terror, or both. You. Zeke's Thara's voice came out as a whisper. You live like this every moment? Every single moment of your existence? Live like what? Dr. Kim asked gently. Zeke's Thara sat up slowly, her silver skin seeming paler than before. The storm. The infinite storm of light and sound and feeling. I touched his mind for perhaps 3 seconds, and I experienced everything. High Counselor Vex Ani entered the medical chamber with Vorth and 2 other physicians. They had been waiting for Zeke's Thara to wake, hoping she could explain what had happened to her. Mind Speaker, Vex Ani said with obvious relief. We feared you were lost to us. Zeke's Thara looked at him, and for a moment her expression was completely alien to her own species. It was the look of someone who had seen something that changed everything they thought they knew. I was lost, she said quietly. Lost in a human mind. Do you know what it's like in there? She turned to face all of them, her movements still careful and deliberate. Imagine trying to follow a single conversation while standing in the middle of 1,000 different discussions, all happening at once. But it's not chaos, not really. It's organized chaos. Controlled storm. Dr. Kim activated her recording device. Can you describe what you experienced? Zeke's Thara closed her eyes, as if remembering was painful. I entered his mind, expecting to find thoughts arranged logically, like every other species. Instead, I found layers, endless layers of consciousness operating simultaneously. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Dr. Kim. He was thinking about our diplomatic meeting, yes, but he was also remembering his mother's voice singing a song from his childhood. At the same time, he was worried about whether he had left his apartment lights on back on Earth. He was also feeling proud of humanity's achievements, sad about conflicts in his past, and calculating how much time was left before lunch. The alien physicians exchanged concerned glances. This sounded like severe mental illness to their organized minds. But that's not the strangest part, Zixthara continued. All of these thoughts were connected in ways that make no logical sense. The memory of his mother's song was somehow linked to his diplomatic strategy. His worry about apartment lights was connected to his feelings about responsibility and leadership. Everything touched everything else, in a pattern that was both random and purposeful. She stood up from the medical platform, moving with more confidence now. And underneath it all, running like a constant river through every thought, was the awareness of death. The room fell silent. Even Dr. Kim looked surprised. He knows he will die, Zixthara explained. Not someday, not theoretically, but as a constant fact that influences every decision. He was worried about our diplomatic meeting not just because it was important, but because his life is limited and every moment matters. This awareness of mortality makes everything more intense. Vexani studied her with concern. This sounds like a form of torment. How do humans function with such mental burden? Zixthara laughed, a sound that startled everyone in the room. It wasn't quite her normal laugh. It had something human-like in it. That's what I thought at first, she said. But then, I began to understand. The chaos isn't a burden. It's a tool. Captain Park could consider our diplomatic situation from dozens of angles simultaneously because his mind was processing multiple streams of information at once. She began pacing, something she had never done before her contact with the human mind. He was analyzing our body language, remembering historical precedents, considering multiple possible responses, and imagining long-term consequences all at the same time. His chaotic thinking allowed him to be ready for anything we might say or do. Dr. Kim leaned forward with interest. What else did you experience? Zixthara stopped pacing and faced her. The contradictions. He loved his home planet Earth, but also recognized its flaws. He trusted humanity's intentions, but worried about their mistakes. He wanted peace, but was prepared for conflict. He held all of these opposing ideas in his mind simultaneously, without any distress. She looked at the alien physicians with something like pity. We telepaths spend enormous energy maintaining mental harmony and consistency. Humans simply accept that they can believe contradictory things, and let the tension between ideas create new solutions. This sounds impossible, Forth protested. Consciousness requires order and logic. Does it? Zixthara asked. I experienced the most complex, adaptable form of consciousness I've ever encountered. Captain Park's mind was like a tool designed for navigating uncertainty and change. Our minds are like precise instruments. His mind was like weather, powerful and unpredictable, and capable of adapting to any environment. She turned to Dr. Kim with obvious curiosity. But the most shocking thing was the self-deception. He was simultaneously confident in his diplomatic abilities and convinced he was inadequate for the task. He knew he was being overly optimistic about human-alien relations while choosing to be optimistic anyway. He understood his own psychological patterns while being unable to change them. Dr. Kim nodded. That's normal human psychology. We call it cognitive dissonance. We can be aware of our own mental contradictions without being bothered by them. Aware of lying to yourself while knowing it's a lie, Zixthara said with wonder. And somehow, making it work as a strategy for dealing with an uncertain universe. High Counselor Vexani had been listening to all of this with growing amazement and concern. Mind Speaker, you speak as if this chaotic consciousness is superior to our organized thought. Zixthara considered this carefully. Not superior. Different. But perhaps more adaptable. We think in straight lines. High Counselor. Humans think in storms. When I touched Captain Park's mind, I realized why they have achieved so much despite lacking telepathy. They don't need to share thoughts because each individual mind is already thinking like 1,000 minds at once. She looked around the room at her fellow aliens. We have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years through unity and shared consciousness. We have brought peace and order to countless worlds. But we have also become predictable, stable, unchanging. Her voice grew quiet, thoughtful. In those 3 seconds in a human mind, I experienced more new ideas and perspectives than I had encountered in centuries of telepathic communion with our own species. Vorth stepped forward with obvious concern. Mind Speaker, are you certain the contact did not damage your mental patterns? You seem changed. Zixthara smiled, and again it seemed somehow more human than alien. I am changed. I've seen what consciousness can be when it embraces chaos instead of fearing it. And I think I understand why humanity might be exactly what the galaxy needs. High Counselor Vexani's expression grew very serious. Explain. Often, anyone. We've created a perfect, stable civilization, Zixthara said. But perfection doesn't grow, doesn't adapt, doesn't solve new problems. We've been using the same solutions for millennia because our organized minds don't generate truly original ideas. She gestured toward Dr. Kim. Human consciousness is designed for adaptation and creativity. They thrive on uncertainty because their minds are built to handle multiple possibilities at once. They could help us grow beyond our current limitations. The room fell silent as the aliens contemplated this radical idea. Finally, Vexani spoke. If what you say is true, then perhaps we should learn more about these humans before deciding their fate. Zixthara nodded eagerly. Yes, but carefully. Very carefully. Because if I could barely survive 3 seconds of human consciousness, we need to find new ways to understand them that won't destroy our minds in the process. She looked directly at Dr. Kim with obvious respect. They are far more dangerous and far more valuable than we initially believed. Dr. Kim, Sojun, and Zixthara sat together in the research laboratory, surrounded by displays showing brain scans, neural pathway maps, and consciousness analysis charts. They had been working together for 3 days, trying to understand exactly what had happened during the telepathic contact. Show me again what you experienced when the chaos started, Dr. Kim said, adjusting the holographic display. Zixthara closed her eyes and concentrated. The alien technology responded to her thoughts, creating a 3-dimensional map of the mental contact. Swirling patterns of light showed the moment when her organized telepathic mind encountered Min Jun's chaotic human consciousness. Here, she said, pointing to a section where the patterns exploded into complex fractals. This is where I expected to find linear thought progression. Instead, I found this. The display showed what looked like a storm system, with thousands of interconnected streams of activity flowing in seemingly random directions. But as Dr. Kim studied it more closely, she began to see patterns within the chaos. It's not random at all, she said with growing excitement. Look at these connection points. Your mind interpreted it as chaos, but there's actually an incredibly complex organizational system at work. She manipulated the display, highlighting different aspects of the neural activity. Human consciousness doesn't work in straight lines like telepathic minds. It works in networks. Every thought connects to multiple other thoughts, creating backup pathways and alternative solutions for any problem. Zixthara studied the patterns with fascination. You're saying that what appeared to be mental disorder is actually a more sophisticated form of organization? Exactly. Imagine if your mind had to solve problems without being able to share knowledge with other minds. You'd need to develop internal methods for considering multiple perspectives simultaneously. That's what human consciousness does. Dr. Kim brought up a comparison chart showing telepathic versus human thought patterns. The telepathic minds showed clean, organized pathways with clear, logical progression. The human minds looked like lightning storms of interconnected activity. Telepathic species evolved with shared consciousness. Dr. Kim explained. You could divide mental labor among many minds. So, each individual mind could remain simple and organized. Humans evolved in complete isolation, so each mind had to become complex enough to handle everything alone. As they worked, Captain Min Jun entered the laboratory with news that would soon prove Dr. Kim's theories in the most dramatic way possible. "We have a problem," he announced. "The station's main fusion reactor is experiencing cascade failures in the magnetic containment system. The Alliance engineers can't figure out what's wrong." Through the viewport, they could see Alliance ships maintaining careful distance from the station. The alien engineers had been working for 6 hours with no success. Their methodical, logical approach was failing to identify the source of the problem. "How long before containment fails completely?" Dr. Kim asked. 12 hours, maybe less," Min Jun replied. "After that, the reactor goes critical and destroys the station." Zeke's Thara stood up immediately. "I must inform High Counselor Vexani. Our best technical minds are working on the solution." "Wait, Doctor," Kim said, an idea forming in her mind. "What if we let human engineers take a look at the problem? This might be exactly the kind of situation where our chaotic thinking could help." Min Jun nodded. "I was thinking the same thing. Our engineering team has been studying the Alliance technology. Maybe fresh eyes could spot something the aliens are missing." 20 minutes later, Chief Engineer Park So-young and her team were reviewing the reactor diagnostics in the station's engineering section. The Alliance technical experts watched skeptically as the humans studied readings that had baffled the galaxy's most advanced minds. "The magnetic field fluctuations are following this pattern," So-young said, tracing lines on the display. "But look at these secondary harmonic resonances. They're not random. 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 Random." Her team clustered around the data, their minds working in the chaotic, multi-layered way that Zeke's Thara had experienced. They weren't following logical progression from point A to point B. Instead, they were considering dozens of possibilities simultaneously, making intuitive leaps based on incomplete information. "What if the containment failure isn't a malfunction?" suggested engineer Lee Min-ho. "What if it's a resonance cascade triggered by the station's rotation interacting with the reactor's magnetic field?" "That's impossible," protested Thex, the Alliance chief engineer. "We accounted for all rotational variables in our calculations." So-young was already running new calculations, her mind jumping between orbital mechanics, magnetic field theory, and intuitive hunches about how complex systems could fail in unexpected ways. "Not the primary rotation," she said excitedly. "The micro-vibrations from the docking clamps. The Alliance ship that arrived yesterday changed the station's harmonic frequency by 0.003%, just enough to create a resonance cascade over several days." The Alliance engineers stared at her in confusion. How could such a tiny change cause system failure? "Complex system interactions," engineer Kim Jae-won explained. "Small changes can have big effects when they build up over time. We call it chaos theory." The human team was already implementing a solution, adjusting the magnetic field frequencies to compensate for the harmonic interference. Within 2 hours, the reactor stabilized completely. High Counselor Vexani arrived as the crisis was ending. He studied the human engineers with obvious amazement. "How did you solve in hours what our finest minds could not solve in days?" So-young shrugged. "We thought about it differently. Your engineers were looking for major system failures, because that's the logical place to start. We considered the possibility that something tiny and seemingly unimportant might cascade into a major problem. Dr. Kim saw the perfect opportunity to demonstrate her theories. Hi, Counselor. This is exactly what we've been discussing. Human consciousness excels at this kind of problem because we naturally think about multiple possibilities at once. She activated a display showing how the human engineers' minds had worked during the crisis. Unlike the linear thinking patterns of telepathic minds, the humans had considered dozens of theories simultaneously, following hunches and intuitive leaps that didn't follow logical progression. Your engineers followed standard diagnostic procedures because that's how organized minds work, Doctor, Kim explained. Our engineers considered dozens of wild possibilities because chaotic minds generate creative solutions. Zixthara studied the neural activity patterns with growing understanding. They weren't trying to think logically. They were using controlled chaos to explore solution space more completely. Vexani was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a note of recognition that seemed to surprise him. For 10,000 years, the Alliance has maintained perfect stability through shared consciousness and logical thinking. We have avoided conflict, eliminated uncertainty, and created harmony across the galaxy. He looked around at the human engineers, who were celebrating their success with obvious joy and relief. But we have also avoided growth. Our technology has barely advanced in millennia because our organized minds generate the same solutions to the same problems. We have become predictable. Dr. Kim nodded. Stability is valuable, but adaptability is essential for long-term survival. Human consciousness evolved to handle uncertainty and change. We might not be telepathic, but we're designed to solve problems that organized minds can't even see. Zixthara looked at the High Counselor with something approaching excitement. This is what I experienced in the human mind. Not just chaos, but creative chaos. The ability to consider possibilities that logical thinking would reject as unlikely. Vexani studied the readings from the reactor crisis, seeing how human intuition had solved a problem that Alliance logic had missed entirely. Perhaps, he said slowly, the galaxy needs both kinds of thinking. Organization for stability, and chaos for growth. Engineer So Young looked up from her celebration with the rest of the human team. High Counselor, if you want to learn about chaos theory and complex systems, we'd be happy to share our knowledge. And we could learn from your organizational methods, she added. Maybe together we could solve problems that neither species could handle alone. Vexani looked at Zixthara, who nodded eagerly. The telepathic conversation between them lasted only seconds, but when it ended, the High Counselor smiled. I believe, Chief Engineer, that we have much to teach each other. 6 months later, the research station orbiting Earth had become something unprecedented in galactic history. Human and alien scientists worked side by side, their different forms of consciousness creating solutions that neither species could have achieved alone. Captain Minjun Park stood in the observation deck, watching mixed teams collaborate on projects that were transforming both civilizations. Through the large viewport, Earth hung below them like a blue jewel, while Alliance ships moved in formation with human vessels in perfect coordination. The Neural Interface Project is showing remarkable progress, Zixthara said, approaching from behind. The alien telepath had become humanity's most dedicated advocate, spending months learning to bridge the gap between ordered and chaotic consciousness. Any success with the communication barrier? Minjun asked. Zixthara's expression showed excitement that had become increasingly human over their months of collaboration. Dr. Kim has developed a fascinating solution. Instead of trying to make human minds compatible with telepathy, we're creating technology that translates chaotic thoughts into organized patterns that telepaths can safely observe. She activated a holographic display showing the latest breakthrough. Watch this. We can now monitor human consciousness without the overwhelming chaos that damaged my mind during our first contact. The display showed a human thought pattern filtered through the new translation system. The storm of chaotic activity was converted into flowing streams of organized information that telepathic minds could process safely. And the reverse works too. Zixthara continued. Humans can experience simplified versions of telepathic communion without losing their individual consciousness. We're learning to share knowledge without sharing minds. Unquote. End quote. End quote. In the research laboratories below, Ambassador Li Hejin was working with High Counselor Vexani on the most ambitious project of all, restructuring galactic governance to incorporate both telepathic unity and human individuality. The preliminary results from the mixed thinking task forces are encouraging, Vexani reported. When we combine telepathic organization with human creativity, problem-solving efficiency increases by orders of magnitude. Lee studied the data with satisfaction. The Andromedan supply route optimization solved a logistics problem that had puzzled Alliance engineers for decades, and the environmental restoration project for the Kepler colonies is ahead of schedule by 2 years. How are the Alliance species adapting to individual decision-making? Lee asked. Vexani's silver features showed what humans had learned to recognize as thoughtful consideration, with difficulty, but also with enthusiasm. Our younger citizens are particularly excited by the concept of independent thought. They're forming what they call chaos groups to practice human-style creative thinking. In the engineering sections, Chief Engineer Park So-young was training Alliance technicians in what they had started calling storm thinking. The aliens struggled with the concept at first, but gradually learned to consider multiple contradictory possibilities simultaneously. Remember, So-young told her mixed class of human and alien students, logical thinking is excellent for implementing solutions. Chaotic thinking is excellent for discovering solutions. You need both. End quote. Quote. A young Alliance engineer raised her hand. Engineer Park, when I try to hold contradictory ideas simultaneously, my mind experiences distress. How do humans manage this? So-young smiled. Practice and acceptance. Humans grow up with mental chaos, so we learn to surf the storm instead of fighting it. For telepathic minds, it's like learning a new language. The most significant breakthrough came in the psychological research department, where Dr. Kim Seo-jun was working with Zixthara on understanding consciousness itself. We've made an incredible discovery, Dr. Kim announced during the monthly progress meeting. Human chaos and telepathic order aren't opposite approaches to consciousness. They're complementary systems that evolved for different purposes. She displayed brain scans showing both types of minds working on complex problems. Telepathic consciousness excels at implementing known solutions efficiently. Human consciousness excels at discovering unknown solutions creatively. Separately, each approach has limitations. Together, they cover the full spectrum of problem solving. Zixthara added her observations. We've also discovered that exposure to human-style thinking actually enhances telepathic abilities. My mental range and sensitivity have improved dramatically since learning to appreciate controlled chaos. High Counselor Vexani studied the data with growing amazement. You're suggesting that contact with human consciousness makes telepaths more powerful, not damaged? In controlled conditions, yes, Doctor. Kim confirmed. And humans who learn basic telepathic meditation become more focused and efficient. Both species benefit from understanding the other's approach to consciousness. The transformation wasn't limited to the research station. Across Alliance space, mixed crews were revolutionizing everything from scientific research to artistic expression. Human creativity combined with telepathic coordination was producing innovations that amazed both species. On the diplomatic front, the new partnership had solved conflicts that had persisted for centuries. Human negotiators' ability to understand multiple perspectives simultaneously, combined with telepathic empathy and shared understanding, created a new form of diplomacy that was far more effective than either species could achieve alone. Captain Minjun found Zixthara in her favorite spot on the observation deck as the station's day cycle was ending. The alien telepath had developed a habit of watching Earth's sunset, something she claimed helped her understand human appreciation for temporary beauty. "Any regrets?" Minjun asked, settling into the chair beside her. Zixthara considered the question with the careful thought that had become her trademark. "About touching your mind that first day?" "That moment of overwhelming chaos was the most important experience of my life." She gestured toward the mixed crews working throughout the station. "Look what it led to. Two species that should have been incompatible, creating something neither could achieve alone. The Alliance Council has officially approved the new partnership structure," Minjun reported. "Full integration of human chaos thinking into Alliance decision-making processes. And Earth has agreed to establish permanent exchange programs with telepathic species." Zixthara's expression showed satisfaction mixed with anticipation. "We're creating the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization, one that balances stability with adaptability, unity with individuality." "What do you think comes next?" Minjun asked. "Growth," Zixthara said simply. "For the first time in millennia, the galaxy will grow and change and evolve. Human consciousness will push us to explore new possibilities, while telepathic consciousness will help us implement those possibilities efficiently." She looked at Minjun with something approaching affection. "Your species' greatest weakness has become the galaxy's greatest strength. The mental isolation that made you seem primitive has prepared you to solve problems that telepathic unity couldn't even perceive." Through the viewport, they could see a mixed fleet of human and Alliance ships preparing for the first joint exploration mission to the galaxy's outer rim. The crews would combine human adaptability with telepathic coordination to explore regions that neither species would have attempted alone. "I still can't believe that touching your chaotic mind was considered an attack," Zixthara said, with what humans had learned to recognize as her version of laughter. Minjun smiled. "And I can't believe that our mental disorder turned out to be exactly what the galaxy needed to break out of 10,000 years of stagnation." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars beyond Earth's atmosphere. Two beings from incompatible species who had accidentally created the foundation for a new kind of civilization. In the research labs, human and alien minds continued working together, their different approaches to consciousness, creating solutions that would transform the galaxy. The storm of human chaos and the river of telepathic order had found a way to flow together, creating something more powerful than either could be alone. The future stretched before them, full of possibilities that no organized mind had ever imagined and no chaotic mind had ever tried to organize. Together, they would explore that future with the combined strength of unity and individuality, logic and creativity, order and beautiful, productive chaos. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy not through conquest or superior technology, but through the simple gift of thinking differently. And the galaxy would never be the same again.